welcome here on stage. You are the development director, France and UK, at UK company Tidal Lagoon Power. Now, tidal range energy, what's that? How is it different from tidal stream energy?
Well, firstly, thank you for structuring the presentations in that order. I think it's really good to segue from tidal stream into tidal range, and that way we'll have completed, I would imagine, all the potential energy that you can draw from the tides. Because as the previous panel explained, yes, there is a significant amount of potential in the currents that are created by the tides in some parts of the world where underwater topography combines with those tides to create very strong currents. But there's also the possibility to simply use the difference in the height of the water between a high and low tide, also in areas where there is a very big tidal range. So that's what tidal range is about. It's actually nothing more than hydroelectricity in the sea. It's about building a dam or a seawall that will create a barrier between the outside and the inside of a structure, which we could call a lagoon, and simply to allow the tide to rise on one side of that lagoon, and then to open some gates and some turbines, and then produce energy as the tides fill the lagoon, and then do the same thing again when the tide goes out. So it's a very simple concept. It's actually a very ancient concept. So, in fact, exploiting the tidal range is probably the oldest form of marine renewable energy in the world. Because when you look back into the Middle Ages, all along the French coastline, the Atlantic and the Channel coastline, and all around the UK coastlines, there were tidal mills. Some of you may have seen them if you've been to places like Brittany, where a simple reservoir would fill up with the tide, and as the tide went out, that would turn a windmill to produce flour and grain and so on. So it's a very, very old form of technology, but which actually has huge potential to be really developed at massive industrial scale in many parts of the world today.
Right. Do you have a presentation, or is it just one slide?
I think I've got one or two in there.
Yeah.
I followed the instructions.
Remote.
Okay, you press the green button, obviously.
Exactly.
So yeah, when you talk about tidal range, that's the sort of thing you're talking about. You know, you'll go to various parts of the French coastline, be it the Channel coast, or also the Normandy coastline, opposite the Channel Islands, or the northern coast of France. You will see exactly these types of scenes where you could have 10 meters of difference between the high and the low tide. So this resource doesn't exist all around the world. It's really only in places where there is a sufficiently large tidal range to be able to create that difference in the height of the water. But where it does exist, the potential is just massive. Now, Tidal Lagoon Power calculated that around the UK coastline, you could have 16 gigawatts of installed capacity or more, producing 8% of the UK's electricity requirements. And in France, the potential is similar. Now, amazingly, today there are only 5 tidal power plants in operation around the world. One of them is in France. It was the first one built in the 1960s in Brittany on the estuary of La Havre River, and it's still in operation today. It has 240 megawatts of installed capacity, and there are smaller places smaller sites in Russia, Canada, and China, and a larger facility, slightly larger than La Havre, in South Korea, which was commissioned in 2011. And that's it. And that represents a combined production today of roughly 1 terawatt hour. And yet the potential has been calculated worldwide as being 1,000 times that much. And that's what could technically be developed today and is feasible from a technological and environmental point of view. The actual greater potential is, in fact, 10,000 times more important than what is in operation today.
You just said it's an ancient technology with a great potential. So where is the tidal range energy boom? Why is it not happening?
Well, I mean, it could have happened. Today we could actually have massive amounts of energy produced by tidal range. France, when it inaugurated the power plant at La Havre in 1966, had visions of much bigger structures that would actually produce most of France's electricity requirements for many years to come. But in fact, the 1960s was also when decisions were made to invest in nuclear power, and the tidal energy plans that had that were real plans were pretty much shelved at that point in time. And since then, there have been relatively few other countries which have taken the step of investing in tidal range electricity. Another of the reasons is that the perceived, for better or for worse, that the impacts on the estuaries that were used to create tidal energy are contentious. There's quite a debate around whether the fact of building a dam across an estuary, which has a big tidal range, what are the impacts that is going to have on the equilibrium of that ecosystem. So it's been quite there are perceptions that using tidal range is damaging to the environment. So that's why since the early 2000s, there's been a new type of thinking going in around how to actually really make the most of this resource. And it involves not using an existing estuary, but simply building a seawall along a section of the coastline, building a seawall in the form of a half circle, so it will connect to the coast at both its extremities, and therefore create an artificial reservoir, if you like, as opposed to using a natural reservoir. And therefore, it is a far more interesting proposition in terms of how you manage the impacts on the environment.
And that's what your company is doing, Tidal Lagoon Power, right?
Yeah, precisely. Tidal Lagoon Power began development work for a first project on the south coast of Wales in 2012 and obtained what is called in the UK a development consent order for a site which would have 320 megawatts of installed capacity and producing roughly 500 gigawatt hours of electricity a year. And at the same time, it also undertook development work for a number of other sites around the UK and also started investigating early possibilities to rekindle the tidal range market in France. And that's the work that I've been doing for that company since then. So as of today, there are still no new tidal range plants being built. Things have slowed down considerably in the UK, just as our previous panel explained. I think tidal energy in general went through a difficult period in the 2010s. Nonetheless, the UK government commissioned a report from its former Minister of Energy who basically said categorically tidal range energy must be part of the future UK electricity mix. It is impossible to do without it, given the enormous potential. And so you'll see today in the UK that there are a number of projects. There are still the projects that Tidal Lagoon Power developed that are still live, and there are a number of new operators entering the market, starting to develop their own projects as well.
Right. Well, so there might be many more projects when it comes to tidal range or tidal stream energy to come.
Well, we're really only at the beginning, and I think this is going to be the big growth story of the 2020s. In any case, in terms of the French market, we have decided on the basis of our initial investigations that we will now commence a more intense stage of development. We are in the process of setting up a French company, which will be called France Marais Moteur, and who will start conducting the environmental studies and assessments and the technological studies as well to really develop the potential that exists in this market.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Paul Leslie from a UK company, Tidal Lagoon Power.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for listening here and there.